Welcome to Darshan America. We come to you from Washington, D.C. Ramesh Bhutani is on vacation this week. My name is Shilpa Alimchandani.
And I'm Aastha Verma. Well, folks, it seems like some days our political climate here resembles a boxing match. I don't know. Each week there seems to be somebody new in the lead position. The president has struggled the last couple of weeks. I mean, people have said he hasn't been coming on very strong. He's been noted as being weak. The Republicans have really taken advantage of this and have pushed him into a corner. But this week and last week, I think the president came on strong again, and he's managed to push the Republicans back into their corner now. And I think you saw some evidence of that even through this budget bill, which went up against the Congress. And then you discovered very quickly how fractured the Republican base is. That was a lesson I think we all learned this past 2 weeks, is that the Republican Party itself is feeling a little bit of heat, and they're not very united.
Well, clearly in presidential politics, you're seeing Republicans all over the place. The front-runner spot keeps switching from one person to another. So we're going to have to wait a little longer to see who's going to emerge. But President Obama is really going back to his base. He recognizes that he moved away from his base for a while.
He lost a lot of his independence along the way.
And a lot of people are, frankly, pretty upset with him. So it's time now for him to come out a little bit more strongly, which we've seen recently. And, he's going to events with his base like the Congressional Black Caucus and people who you would think normally he might be able to take for granted. He's not. He's actually spending time campaigning with those folks, knowing that they're absolutely critical for his reelection.
I think you're right. I think that base that President Obama counted on is struggling to find those chords that they found with him so easily the first time around. And so you see him going out on the campaign trail. He's making the same old promises. The question is, this time around, he has to face an uphill battle because he's had the last 4 years to try to establish and set his agenda. And really, he's only had a few victories to celebrate. And in large part, he's been stymied by the Republican Party. The thing I was, hoping for was to have a little bit more of an interesting back and forth amongst the political candidates on the Republican side. Mm-hmm. You saw some of that between Romney and Perry, but Michelle Bachmann, who flared up nice in the early rounds, she's all but basically out of the race at this point. Mm-hmm. And that's disappointing because there's really no other female candidate that has presented themselves. And we all thought Sarah Palin would be a huge presence on the 2012 election cycle, and yet she's nowhere to be seen. So in a way, it's disappointing to be a woman to not see some strong female candidates up there, even from the Republican Party. It would have been nice to see a few more.
Well, yeah, and I also question the quality of some of the female candidates themselves in terms of their positions and as well as their really understanding of some of the big issues. And while a lot of the politicians are fighting over what are domestic issues, Obama is also struggling on the international front. With the United Nations, of course, last year it was all about supporting one day seeing a Palestinian state, and we all know that this time around there was a much more pro-Israeli stance, which has been quite controversial, especially internationally. Well, another big story coming out of the Middle East we've all been hearing about this week is King Abdullah's stance in Saudi Arabia, saying that not this election, but next election, women will have the right to vote in the municipal elections. This is a big, big change. He kind of skipped over all of the other rights that women are working towards and went straight to the big political rights. And I think that people around the world are really happy to hear this news.
Well, I am excited. I think this is definitely a step forward. But what I don't understand is a few months ago, Time magazine did an article about the right of Saudi women to drive, right? And that really was a game changer for them because these women really can't drive today. They have to rely on a male person to take them everywhere, basically. So their freedoms are very restricted, and that basic human freedom of being able to go where you want, when you want, how you want, they didn't have that. So to me, while the right to vote is a significant improvement in their condition, to me the right to drive would have been a bit more meaningful and more every day, because you would change your daily lifestyle. These women might vote once a year or a few times a year, but the right to drive would have given them an everyday kind of freedom.
Well, who's to say that's not still to come? I think he probably went for the big win with political expression, and many of these other rights could follow. It's not just about driving. We're talking about opening bank accounts, obtaining passports, even going to school, all of these things are severely restricted for women. So there are many parts of their daily lives that we're still waiting to see some of the changes. Perhaps this signal is the beginning of all of those changes.
Yeah, I read something else interesting about this. You know, why is the change coming so slow? I mean, you mentioned 4 years. That's a fair distance away. The world can change in 4 years. But the reason why the Saudi king is doing this in what he calls the Saudi style is because of the overwhelming presence of the clergy, who he has to also appease. You know, he can't do something quite so drastic all at once because the clergy will get antagonized. So I guess he's playing a bit of a balancing equation, and he got out the door with this vote. But to me, I think meaningful change happens when it hits at those very tactical layers, where your everyday life is improved, not just symbolically with the right to vote, but in how you live your life.
Well, meanwhile, the Minister of Municipality and Rural Affairs actually said that the reason that they ban women's participation is due to the lack of the sex-segregated voting booths, and I kind of think that is a little hard to believe.
Well, here's even more evidence that Saudi Arabia is changing for the better. They are actually courting other academic institutions to come and help them revamp their colleges and universities, and throwing tons of cash out there to invite this kind of foreign leadership, thought leadership, to come in and revamp course curriculums. Saudi Arabia is inviting not just students, but faculties from other universities to come in and create research projects, joint research projects in the areas of nanotechnology, solar energy, and even stem cell research. These are very cutting-edge, modern programs that they're hoping to install as a way to invite more foreign aid, more foreign students to come in and grow their university systems. Some scholars compare Saudi Arabia today to what China and India used to be back in the 80s and 90s, where you had this tremendous opportunity to bolster those programs, and that's exactly what Saudi Arabia has recognized as the path to having a stable society in the future, is to try to employ their young population, which is having a hard time finding good universities and colleges. Many of them leave and don't return to the Middle East. So this is a way for them to keep those people at home with good jobs and with a good opportunity to get a good educational base.
So where are some of these foreign students and professors coming from?
They're actually coming from all over the world, but even from the United States. They're coming from Harvard University. They're coming from Michigan State University. There's even a project, a $2 million investment, to help figure out how to get rid of weevils. You know, these are the things that really eat the date plants. And as you might imagine, in the Middle East, dates are a major crop. So there are lots of these kinds of joint research projects, but I was really pleased to see that they're open to bringing in these new curriculum, and that they're approaching some of the most